This is a Burr puzzle. You've probably come across one and appreciated its unique, usually symmetrical shape. It's a type of interlocking puzzle where you have a few wooden pieces holding each other together and it's your goal to take them apart. Or put them back together. This is Interlocked. It's a small 3D puzzler, an interpretation of interlocking Burr puzzles. So, hi, and welcome to the first devlog of Interlocked. I've never done anything like this, as I usually keep to myself, but I figured a few videos might prove an insightful look into game development, and it would be a nice way to look back at the development journey once it's complete. Interlocked is based on an older mobile game I've co-created many years ago. It's still vibing out there in the app stores, so in a way I'm remastering the original, rethinking its concepts and bringing it to new platforms. Most recently, I've been exploring getting Interlocked on VR. It's one of the reasons I'm so excited to revisit it. This is running mobile on my Oculus Quest 2, using Unity. There is so much to explore about this, and I'm probably getting ahead of myself, so I will dig into this a little bit later. Oh, and this is Nacho. He is an orange cat. He helps with development. Sort of. Let's take a step back a few years. Back when Flash games were still a thing, in the age of Newgrounds, Armor Games, Congregate, and others, if you wanted to be a game dev, you had to use Flash. The first game I built was Portal, the Flash version. Shortly after, I started working on a puzzle game with my friend Nikita, which eventually ended up being the Burr puzzle game Interlocked. At its core mechanic, Interlocked is a Burr puzzle disassembler. So rather than putting pieces together, you would get them neatly assembled and then unlock it one piece at a time. The piece movement is constrained by what we plainly call the gizmo, which probably looks familiar to anyone who worked in a 3D environment. The gizmo shows where a piece can be moved, locking on one of three axes when dragged. Interlocked Flash was released in 2011, initially on Armor Games' website. Since Flash is dead, it's a bit hard to come by today, but you can still find it if you look hard enough on the internet. Later, we wanted to get the game on mobile devices. The problem was the original game was made with Flash, and that was a big no-no for mobile devices and App Store policy. So Nikita ended up stripping the core engine and completely recreating it for iOS and later for Android. We hired puzzle designers, added new original content, and just made an overall better game compared to the web version. Eventually, we released it on the App Store in 2012. Okay, let's fast forward a decade. Aside from a few updates over the years, Interlocked has mostly stayed the same. I was playing around with VR development for the first time using Oculus Quest. It's been fun, but using tech demos isn't enough. I needed a goal, so I've decided to rebuild and prototype Interlocked for this reason. Instead of modifying a few features in demo scenes, I suddenly had a clear set of tasks. I would need to rebuild the game and learn how to implement core VR features. Since the original wasn't made with Unity, the engine had to be rebuilt from scratch. The first thing is to break apart and analyze the original game. Interlocked features a center stage where the puzzle sits and you can spin it around. The next core feature is figuring out a directional rotation of every puzzle piece, or the gizmo. Then we follow the mouse in whichever direction to unlock an axis, and that moves the puzzle piece around. Once puzzle pieces can move along an axis, we need a collision. Yeah, this was a bit messy at first, to say the least. There are many ways to implement this type of physics, and I've ended up using a combination of rigid body systems as well as raycasting in this case. Once a puzzle piece is far enough from other pieces, it's essentially been unlocked. Once all pieces unlock, well, the puzzle is resolved. Initially, I've used Unity's universal rendering pipeline. Later, I've removed it and gone without a scriptable rendering pipeline. That was an attempt to find a good balance between visuals and performance. Okay, so the base engine more or less works at this point. This was a few weeks after I started prototyping. At this point you feel accomplished, but also very overwhelmed because there's still so much to do. Additional content, VR controls, user interface, scene flow. So of course I went ahead and chose none of those important things and instead decoupled the code to be able to run multiple instances of puzzles at the same time. And then I proceeded to make puzzles randomly try to solve themselves. I mean, just look at them all go. Let's take a look at games like LEGO Builder's Journey. It's one of the most beautiful mobile games I've played. It's also a very simple puzzle game. A similar thing can be said about the legendary game Monument Valley. The mechanics of both of these games are easy to pick up and play and could have been implemented with less environmental storytelling. But their team have decided to try to bring a deeper visual experience, and they did it very well. This is something I want to try to tackle and add some environmental storytelling. Here I'm testing a stylized nature environment. The puzzle must always remain in the center, with the environment complementing it. I'm using an asset called the Vegetation Engine to control the wind and physics as the puzzle rotates and unlocks. It's a great asset and I highly recommend it. Here I've implemented the first user interface in the game using the asset Shapes. It's a real-time vector graphics library, making it really easy to add shapes into the screen. It actually kind of reminds me of how easy it was to add vector shapes in Flash, something I've really been missing a lot in Unity. I've been building the game periodically on my Quest 2 to see how it runs. I've managed to get the game to run at a stable 90 FPS, kind of on purpose leaving some post-process and even real-time shadows enabled just to try to find my limits. That said, VR development quickly made me realize I can't render nearly as much lush vegetation, and I started to cut down on that scope. This is when I came up with the concept of smaller islands rather than lush environments around the puzzle. Okay, it is time for actual VR controls. We have two types of puzzle actions in Interlocked. There is observing, and there is moving a piece around. Let's first go into implementing observation actions. I've decided to go for my own calculations rather than use one of the ready VR drag and drop libraries like Oculus OVR, Steamworks and others because I wanted to have total control about positioning the puzzle. I've implemented two ways to observe puzzles in VR. So other than just moving yourself in 3D space, you can click a puzzle to hold it in your hand, and then the second one is to keep it in place and spin it. These two are kind of the equivalent of spinning the puzzle in place and spinning the camera around the puzzle in a 2D input environment like PC or mobile. I found writing this code similar to writing a 2D drag and drop, except here we have an additional axis and I use quaternions. It was a lot of fun to write and I can do a video about it if it's up anybody's alley. Interlocked is still very early in development, and I'm learning new things every week. Coming off a bigger production, I'm finding part-time solo dev incredibly different. It's amazing how much of my experience can be applied here and how much of it is just completely irrelevant. Remastering an established game brings some really unexpected challenges. I've gotta keep what worked in the original, but also acknowledge that what worked for a puzzle game 10 years ago might not be enough today. Also, I have to be mindful of how I approach the art direction and controls if I want to keep the game portable to multiple platforms. So these will be interesting topics to cover in the future. If you're curious to see how this development progresses, or if you're just here for cat footage, feel free to subscribe and join me in this journey. Thank you so much for watching. Please take care and I'll see you in the next one.